Welcome to our LinkedIn Live event. I'm your host, Madalina Andrei, Partnership Manager with Expath.global. For those of you not yet familiar with Expath.global, it's the first SaaS-enabled marketplace digital ecosystem in the global mobility sector. To put it simply, the first e-commerce platform that enables the direct relationship between local and regional experts and professionals, offering specialized services such as visa, immigration, tax, social security, or relocation, and corporate clients in need of those services in all corners of the world. This is our 33rd live event from Expath.NEXUS series, a series which has as main goal to become a place where we can share best practices in our industry, learn from each other, and most importantly, grow together. This event is part one from a series dedicated to the topic of remote work and is created in joint partnership with Expatise Academy. The pandemic has seriously accelerated the boost in remote working for some organizations, mainly the knowledge-based organizations, of course. Undoubtedly, this provides excellent benefits, both for companies and their employees. Companies, on one hand, they will cut or significantly reduce costs, such as real estate, for example. They can find and hire talented people everywhere, and as it seems, while enjoying some increase in productivity as well. Employees, on the other hand, will get rid of the hassle of commuting daily, right? They will have flexibility to work and live wherever they're more productive or it's more beneficial for them. Although exact and specific data are not yet available, the number of remote workers worldwide is apparently really, really high. However, this is still uncharted territory. There are no actual success models, and many employers are not aware of the implications of remote work, or they just respond to this phenomenon in an ad hoc manner, right? Denying, forbidding, turning a blind eye, to encouraging and initiating, often without consulting the right experts in the field. Since multiple disciplines, jurisdictions, and interests are involved, sooner or later, these employers will need support in terms of education, adequate staffing, advisory, to avoid the wide range of non-compliance risk involved, such as financial or reputational, for example. In this session, part one, and the next one, part two, which will take place on November 24th, we will tackle this topic together with Expatise Academy experts, who will provide us with insights into the legal compliance challenges of cross-border remote work and how to create an organizational structure that is fit for purpose. We'll have some interesting questions and answers today, thanks to the valuable insights from our fantastic expert panel here. Before giving the floor to my guests, I would like to thank all the attendees for joining and watching the event. We have almost 550 people expressing interest for this topic. Please feel free to drop your comments or address your questions. We'll address them as best as we can in this 60 minutes. And a big thank you to our special guests here. I would kindly ask my guests now to introduce themselves, and we can start with Expatise Academy and Inge. Please, Inge.
Okay, thank you very much, Madalina, and also thank you in the Expat team for organizing this event.
We are thanking you.
My name is Inge Nietzsche, and since the start in 2010, I am the chairperson of Expatise. Expatise was founded by international employers, and it is an expertise center and an educational institute. Fully dedicated to agile mobility. At our academy, we offer courses and certifications, and they are all competency-based. That means that they are aligned with the personal education and development path of each individual learner. Sorry, you'll always see that.
No worries.
Okay. So our courses, as I said, are completely individualized from onboarding up to and including an online master course at the Erasmus University for those of you who want to become a strategic partner to the business and to HR. We cater to learners from all over the world, and our faculty is international too and consists of senior specialists in their field of expertise, but they're not only specialists in their own field of expertise, they also understand the coherence between all the HRGM disciplines. And then you think of disciplines such as labor law, social security, income tax, immigration, pension, payroll, duty of care, and so on and so forth. So they are specialists in their own field of expertise. They understand the adjacent fields, and last but not least, they are all excellent teachers, and that is a very rare combination. By the way, expertise is growing very fast, and so we're always looking for specialists and country managers. So if you are interested, please let me know. So we're not only an education institute, we're also an expertise center, and we support our members also in their daily practice. And for that, we created several platforms where HRGM representatives convene every week for 30 minutes to discuss with each other special topics. And when one of these topics needs more elaboration, we organize conferences, such as the conference on remote work.
Exactly, the one that gave us the idea for this live session.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's about the Expatise Academy.
Excellent, thank you, Inge, very much. We can continue with the rest of the guests alphabetically. Alain.
Yes, thank you for giving me the floor, Madalena. My name is Alain Camonier, French name, but living in the Netherlands. There I'm working with a law firm which is called Pallas Attorneys at Law. And Pallas Attorneys at Law is doing international employment law. So all of our lawyers in Amsterdam and in Rotterdam, both in the Netherlands, they only participate in international employment law. So that is also my specialty. I can't do anything else. So that is also the reason why I'm here. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Alain. Nino?
Yeah, I'm
Fingers
also
crossed it's
based in
working.
Yeah, I can hear myself at least. And I'm the owner of Executive, a company that specializes in immigration, destinations, social security advice, very wide range of services. I know what I can do, and I know what I can tax, social security, and
Great, Nino. Thank you very much. Perhaps you can try again to log in. We really need your input for the tax and social security later on. So let's try and make sure we can hear you properly. Thank you, Nino. And we have Yet.
Good
Perhaps you're on
morning.
Yeah.
I saw that I clicked the microphone on the keyboard. Stichter, I'm a partner at Dwayne Morris. We're based in the US, Asia, with offices, global immigration practice for the firm. Interestingly, I've been 99 and have remotely since 2017. So we're speaking today about a topic I am familiar with, and of course, as you already mentioned, 2 years have seen an in interest and exactly this field.
Thank you, Yet. We understood a lot of what you said, but perhaps again, if you can just try to reconnect, the connection is not exactly the best one. We hear you with a lot of interruptions.
Okay.
Let's give it another shot, please. Yeah. Thank you. So to start with Inge, what exactly is remote work, and how is this term understood nowadays? I mean, we hear around us, right, about remote workers, workers that work from anywhere, digital nomads, cross-border workers. Please shed some light.
Yeah, I will try. As you put it correctly in your introduction, it is not a new phenomenon, because we are all familiar with business travelers and with long-term assignments and short-term assignments and digital nomads. These are all forms of remote work, because there's a separation between the location, the base location of the employer, and the location where the employee carries out the work that he or she is assigned to. So that are traditional forms of remote work. But since the pandemic, we have new forms, and each, you also mentioned it, each form has its distinctive features. And what makes it more difficult is to explain this container denomination in just a few words. So let me try to do it as follows. Traditionally, employers moved people to jobs. And since pandemic, in this new remote work order, we see that employers move jobs to people. So the reverse movement. And they move it to people anywhere and everywhere. So no matter if it's temporarily at home, or on a holiday, at the holiday address, or in the train, or on the beach, or whatever, or a more permanent form of remote work, like we see when employers are having access to this global talent pool, and they send jobs to people that live very remotely on the other part of the world, and they stay there. So that's also a new form of remote work. Many advantages for both employers and employees, but there's also, of course, a lot of challenges. And it is the thing that is most difficult is the remote work form that takes place across the border. So as long as it takes place within one jurisdiction, it is very well doable, and there are already HR policies that allow workers to work remotely from home, but always within the jurisdiction of one country. It gets really complicated, really difficult when more countries, hence more jurisdictions, are at play. So to give you a better feeling of how it looks like in practice, I want to share with you two of the main challenges. And the first one is that with these new forms of remote work, the scope of local HR shifted from local to international. Because in the traditional forms, HR was really focused on local rules, regulations, local HR policies. But with staff, domestic staff, moving abroad to work remotely, suddenly HR had to deal with multiple jurisdictions. And that is something that also needs a different mindset. So this is exactly what we at the moment see when the request from the business or from employee is made to HR to be allowed to work remotely from abroad. Then we see many organizations that, maybe if I'm allowed to indicate it like this, local HR is lost. And what we see how they respond to those requests is, as you already mentioned, they deny or they allow it under very strange restrictions, or they do not allow it but don't enforce it. So it's a really strange myriad of different types of handle this remote work from abroad requests. The other main challenge that we see, and of course we who are working in HR Global Mobility know it since years, it is extremely complicated working with all these disciplines. Today we will cover, hopefully, when the technique doesn't let us down, with 4 very, very complicated legal disciplines: employment law, immigration, social security, income tax. So within one jurisdiction, it is already complicated, and the chance of running into non-compliance risks is real. But when you need to work with several jurisdictions because you are working with multiple countries, as is the case in cross-border remote work, then it gets even more complicated. And not only you need to work with all these disciplines, which are very much entangled and very much interrelated, dependent on each other. You can't focus on one discipline and ignoring all the others. That is really the kind of a sin to do that in HR Global Mobility. But now you also need to work with different jurisdictions. And these jurisdictions, they compete with each other. And mostly they also are conflicting. So you must understand how these jurisdictions relate to each other and how to apply all these rules and regulations on different levels: national, international, interdisciplinary. And then you also have the chance of running into non-compliance risks on an international scale. So there, it really gets very worrying if you do not have the right expertise to do that, and if you do not have your advisors and your consultants and your providers, which are essential to do this work correctly. I must add to that, please give me the opportunity to do that, because this is a very tenacious misunderstanding in practice. Working with different jurisdictions also takes place within the European Union. And often, especially from people who do not live and work in this European Union area, they think that because of its single market, it's also a unity of jurisdiction on all these.
Same legislation, the same.
Each member state has its own regime, has its own jurisdiction on all these different disciplines. So it is, as I always say to our pupils, it is a Gordian knot, and the knot gets bigger.
I love that.
It gets bigger, and it's very difficult to unravel it. You can't do it on your own. You need, of course, that is our task, education, ongoing education, because the landscape is changing every day on every front. But you also need a very highly specialized team of advisors and providers
by your side. Yeah, perfect. You mentioned a bit earlier the multiple disciplines involved, right? And the wide range of compliance risks which are interrelated: tax, immigration, social security, and so on. In our industry, however, there is what you can call a knowledge fracture. Yeah, we have the expert providers, usually specializing in one field, right? Immigration lawyers or tax experts or so on and so forth. My question to you would be, how can employers connect the dots in this case and make sure they have the right, the correct, and the updated information in all these fields?
Yeah, it all starts with awareness, and many companies, many organizations are not aware of the complexity, and that trickles down to not having an adequate HRGM department, and that trickles down to not having the right team of experts at your fingertips. So it's also, we see it also as our task to create awareness in this respect, and also create ownership. In a lot of organizations, there is no ownership on, especially on remote work. Just the other day, I saw this on LinkedIn, also this announcement that now there is a remote chief remote officer. But still, I wonder if they really understand what is going on when staff is moving abroad. This is the most simple form of in this remote work domain, but it gets even more complicated when the forms of working remotely gets more complicated, more complex, and so it starts with awareness. It starts with having an HR GM team that knows what it's doing, that has been well educated, and it starts with a great team of advisors. It's no way that you can do this without it. A couple of years ago, there was a global HR director who gave us the assignment to create education for his team, whereby they wouldn't need any advisors anymore. And we
Ever.
And we declined.
Teach me now everything I need to know.
Yes, exactly. And it was such a ridiculous request that we declined. We tried to explain to him that it was a ridiculous request. He isn't working there anymore, so maybe it helped. But anyway, please wake up, people, wake up. This is serious, serious business. And, the chance of running into non-compliance risks, the chance of running into non-compliance penalties is so real. The national authorities enforce these compliance requirements very strictly, and they have nowadays all the tools and the technology to really detect non-compliance at a very early stage. So the chance of getting caught is real.
Amazing. Thank you, Inge, very much. Alain, I think we can try and untangle this Gordian knot, as Inge very, very nicely put it. Let's see, why exactly is labor law important?
Yeah, only a part of the Gordian knot.
Yes, a small part, I know.
To add something to Inge's story, which is completely true, awareness is, of course, the magic word. But I would challenge everybody who is in this field to dare to ask questions. So not only if you talk to your immigration specialist and say, so now we've got everything covered, but dare to ask a question, and what are the tax consequences and how do we cover those? What are the social security issues? How do we answer those? And same for employment law, same for pension, for example. And it's not that you can solve everything, but if you're aware of also the issues you can't solve, you are further than your competitors, I would say. But that as a general remark. I only have knowledge about employment law, so let's talk about employment law. And what we have in our international employment practice all the time is also the post-pandemic wish to have everybody working from anywhere. We all understand that there are different variables in such wishes, which wishes originate both from the employer side. Hey, that's easy. We can reduce our costs, for example. We do need less square meters, which is easy. Travel costs can be decreased, so that's great. The workers in most of the time say we can work more efficiently if we can work from home, if we can combine our private life with our work, and all together we can gain productivity both from the employers and employee side. Question is that true, or is that a myth? We are not the only ones who raised that question, and for example, the OECD, the International Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, has come up with a full report on this question from a global perspective, we see locally, in my case in the Netherlands, that the Social Economic Council of the Dutch government has taken over large parts of this report. And to be honest, the result is that hybrid working does create, in the beginning, an increase of productivity and efficiency, but there is in all branches, in all sectors, there is a tipping point, which means that it's a parabola, so you must see. So starting off with hybrid working gains productivity and efficiency, but if you take it too long, at that stage, the parabola will decrease, and you will come back to the point where you started, and even you can go behind the point where you started with productivity. And also maybe an open door, but that is per branch, per company, that's different. So it helps definitely, but it is not the magic wand which will create more productivity and better competition perspective for all companies, and you should find that out for yourself. And I can, if you want to know more about that, please have a look at the report of the OECD, and I can also share it with you afterwards, Madalena. That's maybe good.
That would be great. Yeah. What about what? Yeah, please. I was wondering about the non-compliance consequences, right? In terms of employment.
That's what I'm referring to now, because of this reason we get a lot of questions, and how are we going to create the hybrid working, and our people are going back to Germany, to Indonesia, to the US, etc., because they can work there from their home place, and they can fill in their spreadsheets to put it not too nice, but it works. How can we do that? Yeah, the thing is that we have to deal with legislation, and legislation, just as Inge said, is local, which means that from an employment law perspective, each employment law has its own borders, and that is always the border of the country or the state where you're living in. And that means that when you send someone, or you have someone, for example, in the Netherlands, my company is in the Netherlands, and I allow someone to work from the US, I have to deal with Dutch law, and I have to deal with law of the state in the US where this person is living. The thing is that okay, that is easy, because then I call a lawyer in the country where the employee is going to, and I'm aware of what is the situation in the Netherlands. But be aware that when we talk about European countries, and then we talk about all European countries, we have to deal with regulations, with treaties, and with guidelines which mandatory provide what will happen in which situation. What do I mean by that? We've had people who lived in the Netherlands and worked in the Netherlands, but were coming from, say, Italy or Pakistan. I don't care too much, but abroad. Then the pandemic rose, and the people said, I want to work from my hometown in Italy. So, okay, of course, very understandable. And everything worked out okay. And so maybe we should keep it that way, but the contract is still a Dutch contract. In such a situation, European law simply says the country where the employee normally performs his or her work is the country of which the employment law rules the employment contract. Yeah, but I have a contract which says that Dutch law is applicable and that Dutch rules apply to this contract. We don't care. European law says that is being overruled, especially if it's in the interest of the employee, and therefore Italian law governs the contract at that moment. And that goes automatically. Only we don't know when that will be. When will these situations occur, those will, from an employment law perspective, occur always in case of accidents, in case of long-term illnesses, in the case of dismissals. If you don't have those, nobody makes a fuss out of it. But when it occurs, I have 15 people working continuously on these issues. So that means that it does happen, and you can't simply close your eyes. Then you say European law, but we are in Pakistan, so what has European law to do with that? So if you go from Pakistan maybe to Thailand or whatever, no, European law has nothing to do with you. But if you come from Pakistan and start working in a European country, or you come from a European country and you start working in a country outside of the European Union, for example, Pakistan again, then every court in Europe will apply this rule. So a Dutch court or Italian court can say you normally work in Pakistan, and therefore Pakistani employment law is applicable to this situation. If that is, if the Pakistani law is less than Dutch law, for example, then of course, you agreed upon something which is giving you more rights and entitlements as an employee than in, say, Pakistan. Just Pakistan as an example. But if there are more protections, or if there are obligations coming from that law, that legislation which you should obey, at that stage the courts in Europe will simply enforce the employer to take into consideration these rules. And that is simply how it works. I can give you a lot of examples where employees say, hey, I want to cherry pick my employment contract, and I want to have the protection of my Dutch law contract combined with some special rules in Brazil, for example, where they have with terminations different.
To choose my own clauses, the one that are most favorable for me.
And that we've had situations where court cases started on dismissal in Brazil, for example. An employee came back to the Netherlands, started the same court case again under Dutch law, got double pay. Those kind of issues are simply fact of life, because you should structure that, and you can't say I'm an ostrich, I put my head in the sand and nothing will change if somebody goes cross border. This is something which is happening and which is also being pushed by European law, and European law again has universal reach, which means that it also stretches outside of the European Union, where but European Union should in some way be connected, because an employee comes from the European Union, goes to the European Union, has been in the European Union, or came out of the European Union. At that stage, please be aware that this is the situation. To end my story, I can tell a lot of stories about this topic.
Alain, from what I understand, things are extremely complicated. So if I'm not mistaken, the main point would be that each case should be assessed specifically one by one, right? Because each country is different from another, right? So the employers should be very, very careful in assessing the specificities of both countries.
Especially in an assessment. If you know what to do, then you can say, everybody we send to the US or to Brazil, we will do it in this way. That's a good choice you can make. But don't think that if you know how to send people from Italy to France, that you also know how it works from Italy to Peru. That's something different.
Exactly. Amazing. I would, if it's possible, if you can just make a brief. What would be the main recommendations you as an expert would give a corporate client managing remote workforce? Like a couple of bullet points that are highly, highly important.
Yeah, it's one. please sort out how it works with immigration, with tax, and with social security. So start there. That is very important. And if you then have that complete, don't forget employment law, because that is what I see happening a lot. Immigration is okay. We know
on the first place, yeah.
yeah, and then employment law. Yeah, we have a contract already in place, but be aware that a contract you have in place should be altered. Maybe a new contract, maybe an assignment letter, maybe it seriously. But because again, with accidents, with long-term illnesses, and with dismissal, you run into big problems. And if everything goes okay, then no problem there. And that's life.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan, very much. We talked about the fact that immigration is usually on the top, well, on the first place in the worries top, let's say, in the challenges top. So yet I'm getting back to you. Why should employers pay attention to immigration? That's obvious, right? I'm more interested here in learning about the main non-compliance consequences if they are not taking care of that in terms of immigration.
Just to start, obviously has been part for a long time. Traditional remote working questions that we related to an employee and the spouse joins, who is that spouse's entity doesn't have an entity in the host country. Can my spouse still work for their Dutch employer, their French employer? Assigned spouse works, things really, or traditional working. Since you have appropriate status country as a dependent, hence you actually hold status about immigration status, questions arose.
Yet we are not hearing you. We are not hearing you very well. No, we hear you with a lot of interruptions. Is there no way we can do something? Unfortunately, we can't. Yeah.
Let me see what else.
If it's the internet, we can't do anything about it, unfortunately. So, but perhaps we can continue with Nino. I'm super stressed out because Nino also had some problems. So we'll try and continue with Nino and discuss a bit about Social Security. We'll start with Social Security, Nino, and in case Social Security is disregarded, right? Just like Alain said, that usually employment law is usually disregarded. Imagine the Social Security is also disregarded. What would be the main non-compliance consequences for employers or for employees?
Actually, I hope that this it's like Friday the 13th, then on a Wednesday. Yeah, I think when it comes down to Social Security, that's an element that overlooked, and maybe employment law in some cases, because people just go sit in a location and see what's going to. One thing that sticks out in my the laws do not fit reality anymore. That has to put a triangle in the shape of a square, and you try to make things work out. It was a lot of risks across the law situation. It could be an exposure for double coverage, could be no coverage, a lot of administrative hassle for an employee. Suddenly he has to register in a particular contributions, and that causes a bit situation. What is that now? We always talk easily about social security entails differs from one. There are countries, for example, where social security. There's also a lot of countries where social security only includes. So when you go lose coverage and you're covered in your host country for a little while, the consequences can also for an employer, the social security can change tremendously. I'm quite glad the country where there's low social security cost for an employer, Ireland is an example, but Belgium and France contributions. So all of a sudden you have to pay, of course, just in social security contributions in those changes status. So those consequences can be are often overlooked at the beginning when someone says, "Oh no, I'm extended stay in Portugal to go and work there because I like the climate."
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Nino. I think we can continue with the social security. Sorry, we can continue with the taxation with the tax sector, right? Thinking having the same question for the tax industry, right? What would be what the tax income challenges or the tax income repercussions in case this is disregarded when it comes to remote working?
Yeah, there's one good thing about mentioned. Other than this environment, with social security, at least got to a way where you are exclusively covered by one system, and this goal that's not always goal. In tax, it's much more. We take it much an allocation of taxation that makes the tax planning so a little bit more complicated. I want to put us often problems. One is in regards of how people subject to tax because of the fact that they are present from a certain jurisdiction. But as an employee, you only know the days that you know that someone has been. When you just look at weekend days, there's 104 days in which we ask the employee where he's been in a year. Those do count towards 383 days of presence. So it's also often getting to know what you don't know, careful in what you allow people you. Second part.
Nino, thank you, Nino, thank you very much. We heard briefly parts of your sentences, and I get messages from the audience that they are hearing a lot of interruptions. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. You definitely need to come again in our next panel, Nino. Yeah, so you definitely need to come again. I'm really sorry. Thank you very much.
Madalena, I think that I am back completely with video and sound.
Yes, please, let's go with the immigration non-compliance and continue, and let's hope we have a better sound this time.
Yeah, I can see the feedback myself now much better as well. So I think we have solved the problems of the delays.
Excellent, excellent. Perfect. So we have immigration non-compliance consequences. Please, yet.
So, and I'm very sorry for everybody in the audience for the poor sound quality initially.
It happens, yeah.
So let's make up for it. I will just really quickly recap what I was saying originally, that basically remote working has been part and parcel of immigration for a long period of time, well before we all were confronted much more with it during the recent 2 years. Traditionally, how this came up is because you had an employee that went on assignment from country A to B, and was married, and the spouse happened to be also employed with a different company, the host country where they were going to live, the spouse's employer doesn't have an entity there, and the question would arise, can I still work for my employer in France where I am joining my spouse in China who is on assignment? So from an immigration perspective, we never really had a compliance problem there because the individual would hold proper status as the dependent of the employee that was being assigned. So remote working was there, and we would talk about it. It's like, as long as you log on from your house, you're not going to, on the street say, hey, I'm working here in China, how great is it? You would also not, in your role, in your French role in this case, you would not try and enter the Chinese labor market, as in you would not be representing your company in China, because that would, as Nino and Alain will join me in saying, that would create the potential for permanent establishment issues for the employer, which is, of course, tax, labor law would then all come in play that you are all going to avoid. So that was the extent of the immigration advice that we would give on remote working, because that was the extent of remote working out there. Fast forward to 2019 through today and beyond, the questions that we get, and to Inge's point initially about the chief remote working officer, it's a reality, it's here to stay. We get more questions from companies, especially startup companies, that don't have any brick and mortar entity anywhere. So even in the country where they are established, they are incorporated, but they don't have offices. Everybody is remote. Well, for anybody listening from the United States here, they will already know what we have problems within the States, because there are, New York, California are the biggest concerning states where you become taxable if you are working in that state for only 5 days already. So it's in the employee's mind, well, I'm in the United States, but what does it matter? I have my house here, and so I pay state income tax there, but you're now also exposing your employer to tax in a state where they were not doing business.
It's more or less like European Union, right? As Alain was mentioning earlier.
Exactly. So it's my point here was like, these problems prevail anywhere and everywhere. I would not be surprised if we would have somebody speaking on India with different provinces. It would be, exposed there as well, or any of the other larger countries where there is more independent territories that have their own regulations in that respect. So that's one part to keep in mind. Now, that's obviously moving around within the country that you hold the passport of, like the US, or if you are a temporary resident or a permanent resident, you are not moving borders, so it doesn't even come up to the employer. It will only come into play when it's tax filing time, and all of a sudden you have a serious nightmare on your hands. So not immigration, yet a big problem moving even within borders. Now we are adding the international aspect to it. We have more questions about people saying, okay, I understand, I can only be in the Schengen area, the 28 countries within the mainland Europe, so basically EU countries plus Switzerland. I am going to go on a long break. I'm going to spend 90 days there. And I say, oh, wait, then I can jump over to Ireland and be 90 days there. And then I'm going to the UK where I can be for 6 months and I don't need a visa or a work permit anywhere. My employer says it's okay, so here I go. Well, now we are again, this is the intertwinement between immigration tax and employment law. Add Alain's advice in there of which jurisdiction will be governing what you're going to be doing in the countries where you are. Take Nino's advice on both Social Security and tax implications that might arise, especially if the individual came from Europe. You have posting regulations, you have a whole bonanza that you're introducing that as an employer you're not necessarily aware of. So that is for somebody who is a visa waiver national. Unfortunately, the visa waiver national is not particularly well schooled in doing math and thinks that, okay, 90 and 180 days, that means I can be 90 days in Germany, and then I go to the Netherlands for 1 day, and I go back to Germany because now I have not been 90 days consecutive. No, that's not how the rule goes. This is what practitioners know, this is what people that travel frequently know, but not the eager, generally young, and it's not nothing bad about young people that are eager. It is simply, this is where the enthusiasm takes over, and unfortunately compliance takes a backseat, and oh yeah, but this is not going to be a problem because I can just move within borders and there is no border control. Surprise, surprise, the person leaves, and this is when the friendly immigration officer leaves through the passport and sees that the entry stamp in fact was 4 months ago or 5 months ago or 6 months or even longer. So now we have the problem from, why have you been here? Oh no, have you been working? That's the whole point where the person was there for. So the big issue there is that the immigration officer, if they're not very sympathetic with you, they will basically deport you on the spot at exit. So deportation doesn't necessarily come up when you are trying to enter a country. It doesn't necessarily come up when there is an inspection while you are in the country. Deportation can very well happen as you're actually seeking to leave, because at that point it becomes clear that you were not in compliance with the immigration rules. Well, what sort of repercussions can that have? Well, it's called a cascade, because what will the employee do? The employee will first look to the employer. Well, you allowed me to go, so whatever the fines are, they're looking to the employer. This might actually escalate further with the employee not being happy with the employer anymore because of how the employer thinks to address the issue. And what is the worst case scenario is actually, you have a termination, but not a very friendly one. And what will the employee do? Seek publication. Well, we know how journalists are always happy to have juicy stories. So this is going to be something that the employer is reading about themselves that they were hoping
on the front page.
Exactly. Because the additional injury to the employee is not only was that individual now deported, let's say it was an American, so visa waiver, travel, and is deported on exit. This gets put in the system. If the immigration officer thinks that this was a grave enough violation, the EU rules kick in and you can actually be banned from traveling to the Schengen country for a period of up to 2 years, and in some countries, 3 years' time. That means that if you now need to travel at a later date on business, viable business, you are not admissible. You cannot go take your kids to Disney France. You cannot go, lie on the beach in Spain. You cannot visit the Roman ruins in Greece or in Italy. So I love
how you're making it a story. I love it.
Well, but this is the reality to the
yeah, employee. It is. It's a general travel ban, basically.
It's a general travel ban, but no, this was just hence Europe. Oh no, now you're also, because think about it, so it's put in the system, this will now also come up to all your other visa waiver permissions. Because now you go to Canada, and I know using an American was a bad example because Americans are the only ones that do not need permission, a pre-approval to go to Canada. So let's say this was instead of an American, we were talking about a Japanese national. The Japanese national does need to apply for what is called an ETA, an Electronic Travel Authority, before going to Canada. What will come up when you try and apply that? This is the same, actually, for people that don't know. It's a similar application as the ESTA. It's a similar application as what the European Union is introducing starting next year. So you get denied on that. That means that in order to go to Canada, you now need a consular application. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it means serious delays. Depending on the region where you have to apply, we are seeing processing times within the US is 13 weeks. We see it in India, 26 weeks. We see it in certain African countries up to 40 weeks to get your visa to Canada issued. So if this was for business travel, needless to say, the company is not going to be all too pleased. Now you show up at your visa appointment. What do these applications ask? Have you ever been denied entry or deported? Well, now you have to say yes, because that was also the reason why the ETA was denied. And the questions then become, do you make a habit out of this? Because it's basically, it's not going to be fun. That's, compliance on the employee side, potential deportation, potential ban, serious problems, immigration-wise, traveling to other countries, not for only the 2 years that the ban is in place, but that ding on the individual will remain in place for the rest of their natural life. So on the employer side, if this is a company that really doesn't seem to care, the authorities may go after the employer and fine the individual. If this was an employer that actually
How much can a fine be? How much can a fine be?
It's jurisdiction by jurisdiction.
Yeah,
it
but
can be
like the largest fine you have ever heard of.
Oh, the largest fine is even worse. It's actually imprisonment for even that is if you
For
have
the administrator or what?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, for example, countries where the managing director or the authorizing officer is individually liable for the actions the company takes. So that is, for example, Germany, the managing director and the authorizing officer in the UK. So that's when you talk to people about taking on these roles within an organization, the entity also needs to be really aware of what you're asking your own employees to take on, because that's another thing that we're seeing. And I know it's not part of the actual topic of today, but Brexit has obviously created a lot of remote working and problems for Brits coming towards the EU right now and vice versa. And so we see a lot of companies fast-tracking the request for UK sponsor licenses, not really thinking through what the implications are on the authorizing officer. And it's basically, oh yeah, you just take on that role, we'll deal with that later. And then you have compliance rolls around and you have a big problem on your hands.
Yeah, yeah. Yet I was wondering what would be, because we're closing, we are approaching the final minutes. What would be the main recommendations you would give employers in terms of immigration risks?
So it's not just, I really want to have people first understand this is not just immigration. You have to bring your tax, social security, and employment in at the same time. When you are talking remote working, as in you're sending people to countries or allowing people to work in countries where you do not have an entity yourself. You need to talk about these things. If your policy is going to be that you're going to allow people to remote work for longer periods of time, you don't have an entity, I would highly recommend thinking about EORs, employment of record entities. Yep. To deal with Alain's field, the employment part, because that is basically for people that are not familiar. So if you don't, let's say use Spain, you don't have an entity in Spain, you have employees that you're going to allow to work in Spain. An EOR is an entity that has establishments in the various countries, i.e. including Spain. The EOR would engage your employee, and then the EOR would basically lease back your employee to you, so that there is an employer of record for social security withholdings, for tax payments, and you have at least a thinner layer of protection when there is a compliance issue. Immigration-wise, what we're starting to see more and more is the so-called golden visas, or the
investment visas.
So the investment visas that are being used more and more as golden visas. I'm thinking really Portugal on this in this front, because that started as an investment visa, but is now much more a remote working visa, because it actually says that as long as you keep your payment, so basically your employment outside of the country, you can still qualify for the D7 visa there. Lithuania has an actual golden visa. Portugal and Spain both have more the nomad visas. We see it in the Bahamas. So these type of visas, but so the digital nomad visas are really geared towards the tech industry, where people can remote work as long as they have their laptop and a good internet connection.
Unlike others.
Unlike others. So the idea there is that for a year, and in some countries extendable for another year, they will give the individual a visa so that they can actually legally work in the country as long as the employment remains with the employer abroad. So the Bahamas is one of the main destinations because people like the weather there, and so it's a 12-month deal, and then it's over and done. But you will start to see that more countries are bringing this online because
the list is growing and growing.
It's a revenue generator, because what you're getting is you get young, talented people that make good money abroad, and all they get to do is spend it in your jurisdiction. I mean, who wouldn't want that? So that's I think that we are only seeing the beginning of the nomad visas. I also think that we will start to see much more regulation around it, because it's such an uncharted territory still. The second thing that I think we are going to see a lot more development in is the whole employer of record, because I think that is not well regulated. As I mentioned, I think it gives employers a first line of defense where it comes to problems, because as Alain said, employment law only becomes an issue when there is an issue. Nobody is going to have an argument on their contract unless it's time there is an accident, there is an incident, or there is termination. Only at those points are the international employment law rules coming into play. And what will the employee do? They're not going to want to go to arbitration or court in the country where they are least protected. No, they're going to make sure that they are going to be able to benefit from where the most protection is, which is obviously generally not what the employer wants. So hence, I'm thinking that the EOR area is very much still in its nascent state, and we'll see a lot of regulation around both digital visas, the digital nomads, and the EORs. And I really hope that employers are taking this entire area very seriously when they are, I know that everybody is looking to attract talent. There's a shortage of people, good people that you want, so
worldwide.
You want to say yes, but say yes when you have a policy around it. So employers, start working on your policies. It's not a bad idea to allow for remote working or hybrid working, but you need to have a policy in place to deal with it, how you are employing your people, and then talk to your experts. Immigration, tax, employment, social security. We cannot live with each other, and we cannot live without each other.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jet. Thanks a million.
Sure.
To wrap up our session, Inge, what is next?
Yeah, and this also bridges the closing remarks of Jet. Exactly, that is what we need in this area, not only regarding remote work, but regarding all forms of cross-border workforce deployment. We need to align with the business and the HR strategy. We need to align with and take up our advisory expertise as a partner of the business and HR. We also need a robust international HR policy on this, and we need to adapt our processes within the organization. Now, that is quite a task. In the next part of this conference that Expatise, in collaboration with xpath.global, organizes, we will dive into to the depths of the international HR policy. And we also have a part 3 that will take place next year. In that workshop, we will we will deal with writing the remote work business case. It's also a very important component of getting through to HR and business leadership. So indeed, there will be more. And also Nino will be back.
Yes, Nino has to be back. Nino really
Yes.
has to be back. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you,
That
Madalena.
would wrap up this session. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us, for the great insights and valuable knowledge you have shared with us. Thank you all for watching. In case you need further support, you have any questions or you have any issues on the remote work topic, please feel free to reach out to my guests directly. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to help and support.
Yes.
Our next event, part 2 with Expatise Academy, would be on 24th of November. Until then, please feel free to follow us on social media, head up to our website, xpath.global, book a demo session with my colleagues to learn more about our SaaS-enabled marketplace and how it can be a game changer for your business. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.